Hello, this is Alex Plus LEDs, and this is the TRON DIY LED kit assembly video. So what we're going to do first is bend the LEDs. So you'll have to notice that the LED has a long lead and a short lead, and the short lead corresponds to the little flat side of the LED, and the long lead is the one we're going to bend down towards us like that. So as you can see, the long lead is bent and the short lead is still sticking up. And we're going to do that again. We're bending the long lead, we're leaving the short lead alone for now, and I'm just going to go ahead and bend a bunch of these LEDs together. So once those LEDs are bent, we're going to start working with the resistor. We're going to chop off an excess amount of lead, so there's about 1/8 of an inch left, and do this for about 20 resistors. So this is the guy man. So once you have bent all the LEDs, you're going to load them into the template like that. We're going to load all 6 of them. And then using our soldering iron, we're going to go ahead and solder them down like this. And those are soldered together. And let me show you a different angle. So again, we're going to load all 6 LEDs into the template, one by one. And you want to start from the bottom, work your way up. It's easier to assemble that way. And then we're going to go ahead and solder the LEDs like that. And you want to solder from top to bottom. And we're going to clip off the bottom of that and solder on that resistor that we clipped off onto the Thomas variant. So the Thomas variant, you only want to use 4 LEDs up and down, and I'm going to solder them together. And again, we're going to use the same resistor soldered to the bottom of that. And back to the guy man. So once the LEDs have all been soldered together in sections, we're going to use a credit card or something similar to wedge up against the edge of the LEDs and then bend the leads down one by one like I am showing now. It doesn't matter exactly what you use as long as it's kind of credit card thickness. So once that's done, moving on to Thomas. So Thomas, pretty much the same thing, 4 LEDs instead of 6, press down with a credit card and then bend the leads over like that. Back to the guy man. So once you've made a bunch of those sections, we're going to go ahead and stuff them into this LED template and then build them to the right. So we're going to put the LEDs down like so. We're going to load all 4 sections of LEDs into the little template. Make sure you get the pins close to each other so that it's easier to solder them together. And once those are all placed, we're going to go ahead and solder them together. It doesn't really matter if you go right to left or left to right, but just solder it together like that. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to pull the LEDs out of the template, move the LEDs over, and we're going to solder new LEDs to the left of those previous LEDs. So again, I'm placing 2 sets of LEDs, and then we're going to solder them together like I'm showing here. And keep going and going until you have more and more. So once you have a good length of LEDs, you want to check with your helmet to make sure that you have enough length, or maybe it's too long. It depends on your helmet. It depends on the number of LEDs you solder together. So to do this, just take your helmets. I'm doing here with the visor in this guy helmet. Shine a light underneath, and then you could measure and kind of see if you need to add another section of LEDs or take off a section. So this is the Thomas variant, again, 4 LEDs instead of 6, and keep moving it over to solder more and more LEDs. And once you have a section that you think is good enough, you want to measure it with your Thomas helmet, and just measure it in there. I'm doing it without the visor in this case. So as you can see here, it's pretty good. There's a little bit of gap on the edge, but that's okay. So the Thomas helmet from the press photos has these little staggered LEDs on the edge here. So that's what we're going to add in next. So to do this, we're just going to place 3 LEDs, and then 2 LEDs, and then 1 LED, and we're going to solder them together as previously, and we're going to add a resistor to the end of each one. So here's that procedure. So there's 1 resistor soldered, and I'm going to solder these LEDs together, and then add on another resistor to both sets of LEDs. So 1 and 2. So now we're going to go ahead and place these in template using credit card, bend the leads over again, as you see here. And then we're going to solder these guys together like this. Make sure that you decrease LEDs, the number of LEDs from the bottom to the top. So you have something like this. It looks like a triangle. And then we're going to solder it to the rest of the LED matrix. And then we're going to go ahead and do that for the other side. And then we're going to go ahead and check that it fits in the helmet properly and that there isn't too big of a gap. And that looks okay. but it's kind of fiddly to work without the visor in place. So I recommend putting the visor in first. And as you can see, it's pretty good. So back to the guy man. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to bend the leads over of the resistors, and we're going to solder all those resistors together into one big array, so that you can get power across to every single LED. So here I've soldered 2 LEDs, clipped them, bent the lead of the resistor, and I'm going to keep doing this until all the resistors are soldered together. Same thing for the Thomas, although it's a little bit trickier because the LEDs might be a little staggered up top. So that's pretty much the same procedure, just solder all of those LEDs together. So this is the Guyman basic variant. So this is the wiring diagram. It's pretty simple, just kind of follow it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is connect all the LEDs that are poking off to the side, solder them together, and then we're going to take our red and black cable, we're going to strip off the ends, and then we're going to tin the wires so that it's easier to solder right in this step. So we're going to solder the red wire to the bottom, and the black wire to all the tops of the LEDs. And now we're going to go ahead and work with the other side of the wire. We're going to go ahead and complete the wiring diagram, red to red, black to black, and add a switch in between, and then wrap it with electrical tape just to keep it from shorting out. And then hot glue the switch just so that it doesn't break apart. So there's one side glued, and I'm going to add a little glue to the other side. So this is what it looks like when assembled. When initially turned on, you can see that the top row isn't working and one of the right columns isn't working. That's okay, we're going to fix that right now. The only reason that it wasn't working is because there's a little break in the connection right there. And we're just going to go ahead and solder that back together. It's helpful to use the template. And once that's soldered, it should be better. Same thing with the column, the resistor wasn't working. And as you can see, it's pretty good. So same thing with the Thomas, pretty much the same wiring diagram. Solder all those LEDs together at the top, all the little leads. Solder them together, and then just like with the Guy Man, we're going to add the red wire on the bottom, black wire on the top, like so, and then put batteries in there and it works. So this is the animated PCB assembly. So what we're going to start with the potentiometers. Just wedge them in place like so, and then put the 2 buttons down below. There's one for the off button, and then the next one for the mode select button. And then we're going to take the 0.1 microfarad capacitor and put it into that space there. And then we're going to take the electrolytic capacitor, which is polarized, so you have to watch plus and minus. Long lead is plus, short lead is minus. And we're going to wedge that into place, make sure you don't mess this up. And then flip it over and solder all of the leads together. And then using your flush cutters, we're going to chop off the excess leads so that nothing gets shorted out. And now we're going to solder the switch into place. And first you want to do is tin one of the pads and then solder on the switch like here. And then we're going to go ahead and solder the other 2 contacts onto the switch like so. First chop off the excess leads as you see here, and this will make it easier to solder everything. So first we need to take the ribbon cable that comes in the kit. We're going to splay all the wires apart, and then we're going to go ahead and trim off some of the insulation, and then we're going to go ahead and tin the wires as usual. So following this wiring diagram, you should be able to get it all put together. And we're going to go ahead and solder all the wires to the LED matrix first, as I'm doing here. There's 7 wires, and I'm going to tin the pads on the PCB and solder the wires on as the diagram shows. So there's all the wires soldered. And now we're going to take the red and black wire, and we're going to tin it, and that connects to the PCB. And then we're going to solder the red and black wire to it, and then the other ends go to the battery pack. And we're going to wrap that with some electrical tape, and it's done. So this is the Thomas, slightly different wiring diagram, but pretty much the same. Just a couple less connections to solder, as 2 less LED rows. So that's all soldered together, and likewise we're going to go ahead and solder the battery pack to the wires that connect to the PCB. And now we're going to go ahead and take the black acrylic paint, and we're going to paint the back side of each LED. So this helps prevent light leakage from inside the helmet, so when you're looking out, it's a little bit easier to see if you paint all the LEDs black. And this is just the Thomas variant, but you do the same exact thing for the Guy Man, just paint the backside of each LED. And this is the Guy Man that's assembled and painted and pretty much ready to go. So if you can see that, there's a little black spot on one of the LEDs, and that's from the paint. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is use an isopropyl alcohol pad to wipe all that off. And that comes off pretty easily, and we're pretty much ready to add the mounting. So the mounting is 2 sets of plastic, and they are glued on using a hot glue gun. So what you want to do is first peel off the paper off the back of the plastic, add some hot glue, and stick it on the edge of the LED display, like so. So that's one side done, and you do the same thing to the other side. And then hold that in place for a couple seconds, wait for the hot glue to cure, and you're ready to go. And now moving on to the Thomas. So the Thomas is slightly different in the mounting. You need to first cut the pieces of plastic down the middle, so you have 4 sets of plastic, and then that gets glued onto the LED display like so. So just kind of place those there. We're going to hot glue them into place. That's pretty much it. Just add the hot glue and then place them kind of evenly. It doesn't really matter how even it is. And those tabs will be cut off when you want to mount it into your helmet. And I'll have a separate video for this posted. So yeah, that's the end of the tutorial for this part of the assembly of the LEDs.